Some thoughts on video of what I need to make to be able to properly use my swiveling, milling, whatever it's called, attachment for a Myford lathe. Now, I've got some pictures and some dimensions for the base plate that should be on here, that forms part of the slide that attaches to the cross slide of the lathe. Now what that has is holes through it to allow these T-bolts to come through, and it also has two pins which help to locate it securely into the T-slot of the cross slide. Now the picture and dimensions I've seen show a spigot on the bottom plate. Now, when I look at this one, the actual depth that I have in there is very shallow, which made me think, well, there's not much room for the spigot that was given to me in the dimensions by a very kind person on the forum. And what I noticed is that this part, if I can just push it out, it's not coming out very easily, it's stuck in with grease, has got the spigot on it, if you know what I mean. You can just see it coming out there. I'll pull it out and take a picture. Now, the other thing is, splitting it down a little bit, what I notice is, at the other end of the angle, that's the angle, which is almost a symmetrical type of construction, the spigot is on the part that's mounted onto the thing that holds the vise, and this bit is simply a washer. So you've got a washer there, clamping onto that, and you've got a spigot there. Now, and that then forms the swiveling part on there, because that's a nice fit onto there, and it's only the grease and things that stops it, so that you can slacken off these two nuts, adjust it, the spigot keeps it centralized, and then tighten it up. Now, if I've got the spigot on here, presumably I don't need the spigot also on this base, which makes the fabrication of the base very much simpler. What you can see is that I have used it, and the way I've used it is by using spacer nuts and washers to allow me to use existing T-nuts and just clamp it just on this base here onto my cross slide, which I know wasn't right, because obviously you shouldn't be having to use spacers this side, but it did allow me to use it, and it did work, and it had all the functionality. You can swivel it in 2 or 3 directions. The only problem is that you've got interference then, because this part here comes down below that seating part there, so you're very limited as to where you can mount it onto the cross slide in that case. So it does need this washer on the base. But what I'm going to suggest and seek advice about is that I don't need a spigot on this part, because the spigot is there, and once it's clamped up, that part allows you to have your swivel action, and yes, I'll take it apart and show the pictures, and therefore this part doesn't need to provide it, just needs to provide a hole for these and 2 pins for locating into the T-slots in line with those holes. I hope that's enough to make sense. I very much like the suggestion that you use continuously cast bar, and it supposedly is very good. I found a place which is Yorkshire Metals out in Wetherby, but they do about 20 different grades of cast iron. So then I'm completely flummoxed as to what grade you would use. What I do have is these 2 pieces of steel. I'm assuming it's steel that's been rolled rather than cast. I know this is going to be harder to machine, but perhaps if all I'm doing is facing it on 2 sides to get it nice and parallel and flat, and then cutting the corners, then I might be able to drill and make the base plate out of that. And therefore the second question is, should I attempt to use the steel, or should I go and order, because you can get flat and round bar, the cast iron bar to make it out of, because of its better machining properties. That's all for that aspect of it. These happen to be just about the right size, but what you can see is that where they've been guillotined off the steel strip, you've got deformation of the edge. Quite a nice guillotine to chop those edges off, isn't it? Two pieces of scrap metal, basically. But, you know, they were free and available. I'd have to order the other. After some disassembly, let me explain. That part, that hole there, fits over this spigot on the rest of the milling vise. It's held on with a simple flat washer type, a couple of studs and a couple of nuts. Yeah. This part here that fits onto the cross slide of the lathe has on the upper surface a washer with spigot attached and a couple of T-nuts, and I think all that's missing is the larger base plate washer, which would go on the bottom, which would be a solid, with no hole in the center of it, be a solid washer with two holes to allow these to go through and two studs to locate. That's my hope, expectation. Can somebody else with a swiveling vise similar to mine, please have a look at their construction and confirm that that would be the case? That would be very helpful.